Okay. All right. Shabbat shalom. We're back. We had a little Sukkot break. We was off while we was over in Sukkot. We couldn't broadcast from out there because it was too because we was in the wilderness. The yeah, the signal was kind of sketchy, so we but we're back. We are going to be looking um I was just gonna go forward because we're in Deuteronomy chapter 8. But I didn't want to skip chapter 6. So we're gonna look at a couple things in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and then jump forward up to chapter 8. Because we can't not talk about Deuteronomy chapter 6 because there's some a few key things there. So um, let's look over beginning with Deuteronomy chapter 6. And let's see if we'll read. Let's see how far we're going to read down and deal with. We'll read down to verse 9. Deuteronomy 6. Deuteronomy 6, verses 1 through. Oh, Dave, can you see that?
Yeah, and this is the command, the laws and right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim to guard all his laws and his commands, which I command you. You are your sons and your grandsons are all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Israel, and shall guard to do it, that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay, so Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 6, 1 through 9. When we look at this, we see a few things here. Most notably, we look at chapter 4. We say the Shema. Verse 4. We say the Shema, every week. As we begin our little service or whatever. Verse 4 here, O Israel, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. When we think about, these few little words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many words that, hold on, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Echad. That's only 6. I just thought about that. Okay, so anyway, I wanted to be 7 so bad. There's only 6 words. Okay, so when we think about it, we talked about the word Shema a lot. The word Shema, of course, is the idea of hearing, but not just only hearing, but obedience attached to it. When you think about a lot of these words, um, they 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 have double meanings, right? It's a fuller thing when you think about hearing from Yahweh. Um, Again, it's hearing and doing. We think about seeing Yahweh. It's about seeing and knowing, right? You have all of these aspects of these different aspects of this one word. So we think about the idea, first of all, of this thing, the Shema that we say to Yahweh, hear Yisrael, hear and be obedient, Yisrael, right? Hear with a idea of doing, Yisrael, right? Don't only be hearers, but be also doers, Yisrael, right? We say this, what? Yahweh our Elohim. We think about this statement here that's being made, Yahweh our Elohim. It's not all the way dealing with who Yahweh is necessarily, but who he is to us, right? When we think about Yahweh, the name Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, Yod-Heh Wah-Heh, that's who the Most High is, right? He is the self-existing one. Let me put this on there. Let me put this dictionary on here so we can look at these words here. Right, we're dealing with the existing one, right? The existing one who is Yahweh, the one who just is. Yahweh is, right? But that's who he is. But when we say the Shema, we're kind of dealing with who he is to us. He is our Elohim, Eloheinu, our Elohim, right? Elohim, he's our ruler. He's our judge, right? He's our mighty one, right? He's our power. He's our strength, right? When we think about all of these things, that you're making a declaration. You're making a declaration that Yahweh is your mighty one. Yahweh is your power. Mighty Yahweh is your strength, right? When we look at here, let me do this. Let me because I just figured out how I can do this here. Let me I just figured this out. I'm getting better with this thing here. Right? When we think about Elohim is just a plural, of course, of El. When we think about Elohim, in the ancient, the root of Elohim is El, right? So that would be an Aleph. That would be an Aleph, a digital whiteboard, right? Oh man, that was so hard. Okay, but in the ancient, the L, okay, is the ox's head. The ox's head. And the shepherd's staff. Right? That probably needs to go a little bit more hook. That looks pretty bad, but you get what I'm saying here, right? So when we look at El in the ancient, you have the ox's head, which has the idea of strength, head, leader, strong, right? And then with the lamed, the shepherd staff, you have the idea of being led, being taught, being kind of pushed. Um, so you have this strong leader, right? You have this leader that leads, or the leader that teaches, or the head that teaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, when we think about the Shema, we're making a declaration that Yahweh, that the Most High is our strong leader, right? He's the one who leads and guides us, right? We make this declaration when we say Shema Israel, when we say Yahweh Eloheinu, when we say Yahweh is our Elohim. He is our mighty one. He is our power. He is our strength. And we're led by his strength. We're taught by his power, right? We declare these things whenever we say
I was thinking,
Yahweh Eloheinu.
I was thinking about how if we're saying that he's our power, then that means, and I mean this is real simple, but we're not our own power and our own leader.
No.
Our carnal minds isn't dictating and directing us, but only he is doing that.
Right. And so the point is that that's what we are declaring.
Mhm.
We're declaring that. So we're kind of denouncing ourselves as being our own strength,
That's right.
our own mighty one, being taught by ourselves. We're denouncing that when we say Yahweh Eloheinu,
Yeah.
right? We're denouncing ourselves, and we're proclaiming, by virtue of proclaiming Yahweh as our Elohim, we're denouncing our own self as being Elohim and any other thing that we might put up in that position.
There's something else that I have to add as well.
What?
That how the original setup was that Yah would be our king.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't going to be a human being that was going to be our king.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to be our king. And so we look at how, David was a shepherd, and how the people was led by a shepherd. But how Yah, and the way he's setting it up here, he's setting it up where he's our shepherd and we're his flock.
Right. That's how he set it in order.
Mm-hmm.
He actually told the people, right, that they don't need a king. He talked about the fact that all the wicked nations around you will have a king, but you, Israel, will not. But in the same breath, he told the people, I know that you're going to look at these other nations, these other places, and you're going to want to be like them.
You don't want to be led by a
So
person.
in the event that happens, and I know that it is going to happen, he told Israel how to do it. Right? But when we think about the perfect will of Yahweh, that's a perfect example right there. When we think about this idea of Yahweh being Eloheinu, being our mighty one, our king,
Yes.
our ruler, right? He his original plan was to actually be that, right? But knowing humans and our weaknesses, right? We needed to have that person that we could look to and deal with, right? So again, we think about this idea of Yahweh Eloheinu. There's many things that we can deal with when we think about Yahweh being our Elohim, right? This thing that we proclaim when we say the Shema. Right. So again, outside of the idea of proclaiming this, again, we think about this as being a statement that's being made, Shema Yisrael. This is a thing that Yahweh wants for his people, Israel, to understand, right? Yahweh wants for his people to be able to hear and understand and know and obey the idea that Yahweh is our Elohim, right? So we're proclaiming it based on the fact that Yahweh wants for us to hear this idea and know it and do it and walk it out, right? Yahweh is one. Yahweh is Akkad, right?
Yes.
Yahweh is one. He is alone, right? He is singular, right? We could think about when you look at this word Akkad, BBD has the idea of the number one, or you can think about it in terms of that. But also, let's see, let's go down to the Strongs here. It's used a lot of places in the scripture, this word Akkad. Let's scroll down past all this. Numeral property united, that is one, or as ordinal first, or he's first or alone. So when we look at this, it does have the idea of unity. When you think about unity, you think about like a collective, right? Think of like a husband and wife, or a group with a common idea. But when we think about it in terms of the Almighty, the only reason why you could think of it potentially from that aspect is because of the vastness of who Yahweh is. But Yahweh obviously is one, right? He's not like it's not multiple gods moving in the same direction, unified, right? There's with this idea of the Trinity thing that people have come up with as being, these three separate and distinct beings with one, this is not what we deal with when we deal with the idea of Yahweh, right? It's important to understand that he is one, right? That he may deal with us from many different levels, but he's one. When we think about, he had dealings with Abraham, he had dealings with Jacob, he had dealings with these people in earth. But even though he was in earth, he was also in the heavenlies, right?
He's outside of our understanding, our human intellect,
we can't understand how he could be, how I could be dealing with you on one level and you be somewhere else and you not be too. Like that's confusing to our little minds, right? Our little
we're
pea
stuck
brains.
in time and space.
That's how we understand things, because we never experienced anything that's not like in a straight line. Like if he's here, then he can't be over there at the same time. But he's one, right? So I think that when we think about some of these ideas, the Most High is telling us what he is. He's telling us, how we are to deal with him, whether we're able to actually even understand him fully or not, right? He's letting us know, I am one, right? I'm one. Look at the other verses, a couple of chapters earlier. In chapter 4, there's none beside me. I need that. Yahweh is heaven, Elohim of the heaven, and he's Elohim of the earth. And there is none beside me. Right? He's one. Right? So just looking at that again is just, we dealing with this thing that we declare. And again, we're declaring it, but also when we have this, how it begins, Shema Israel, we're declaring it, but it's also something that is to be declared to us so that we can declare it, right? So it's kind of on both ends. This is the statement and thing that we say and declare as our, this is our watch word of faith, Shema.
I was thinking about with the declaring, how that ties in with the holy days, trumpets, making a proclamation, making a declaration of whose side are you on,
right?
So you hear in order to make proclamation of where you're at, and in hopes of bringing other people on board as well.
Right. You declare the thing that you've heard. You receive a thing, and then you declare the thing that you receive. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so verse 5, and thou shalt love Yahweh thy Elohim with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Right, this is a pretty serious verse here, right? We think about the idea of loving Elohim, but we can't really love Elohim with all of our heart, soul, and might without understanding what love, ahav, is, right? So let's look at this a little bit. Let's get down to the Hebrew word, ahav. Let's look at it here. The meaning of love. The semantic range of the verb includes loving or liking objects and things such as, bribes, wisdom, wine, peace, tasty food. The word also conveys love for other people, love of Elohim, Elohim's love of people. I think for me, when I think about the idea of love, I understand love to be a thing that defines how I deal with you. In other words, the idea of love, as far as how I see it is an action as opposed to a reactional thing. And the best way that I can think about that is with children, with my children. I feel a way about my children based on the simple fact that they are my children. Right? It's not as if they do a thing where they have to earn anything from me. Right? Because of the simple fact that they are my children, therefore I love them. Right? It's not connected to their actions. It just is. You can be upset with your children, right? You can, have all of these type of feelings about your children that's based on what they've done or didn't do. But it's not connected to the love, right? Because love is not about reaction. right? So
it seems like if you love somebody because they've done something or whatever, that's a selfish love.
I don't feel like that's love.
That's just a response to a positive response to kindness towards you.
Yeah. I mean, if I do something nice for you and then you start treating me a certain way,
because you did something.
right after that, then that's not love, right? That's a response to the actions that you were, that were levied out to you. So when we think about this famous verse, right, in John, let's pull it up. I could quote it, but I'm just gonna pull it up. We think about this verse. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth son, that everyone who believes in him should not perish but possess everlasting life. Elohim so loved the world, right? But the world's full of wicked sinners.
It is.
But because of what Yahweh had in his heart for humanity, he made this way so that the people was able to be turned from their wickedness and unrighteousness and turned back to him, right? Because if you think about if the Most High would have dealt with man based on the actions of man, then we wouldn't have nothing, right?
We wiped out a long time ago.
See what I think that's. Let me look over Peter real quick. Is that Peter? Yeah. 1 Peter chapter 2. I can just pull it up. Look. 1 Peter. It's way down here. 1 Peter 2, verse 9. Says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once was not a people, but now the people of Elohim, who had not obtained compassion, but now obtain compassion. Right? You were called out of darkness. While you was in darkness, he called you into marvelous light. Well, the reason why he called you out of darkness, out of the muck and the mire, in your place of sin and unrighteousness, was because of the fact that he loved you. Yahweh decided that he was going to deal with you in a certain way and then acted on that, not on what you were doing or who you were, right? So again, love, real love, scripture tells that Elohim is love, right? That's the character of Yahweh. Love is the character of Yahweh. It's not this reactional thing that we do. It's not this thing that kind of is based on how you treat me. It's not this emotional thing that we get caught up in, right? This little lovey-dovey kind of emotional kind of thing. Oh, baby, I love you so much, blah, 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 right? That's just emotion, right? People do enough nice things for them, you're going to feel a certain way about them, right? But this love that we talking about, that we connect with the Almighty, again, doesn't have any connection with what we do towards Him, but it's a decision. My wife don't like this when I talk to her about love, right? I love my wife because I decided to love her, right? I decided to love her. I didn't. Right, it didn't have anything to do with anything else but a decision that I made, that I was going to now deal with her in a certain way forever. Right? So when we think about love from the from the aspect of the Almighty, it's different than this little emotional emotional thing that we do. Okay, let's go back to Deuteronomy here. Keep going. Back to Deuteronomy 6. Okay, so this attitude, this way that we are going to think about and deal with the Almighty, right? When we think about what we do for those that we love, right? When we think about, we want good for them, right? We want the best for them, right? We want to be pleasing to them, right? We want to do those things which are pleasing to those that we love, right? So this is what we're talking about. And you shall love your Elohim. You shall seek to be in right standing with Elohim, with all of your heart, with all of your being, and with all of your might, right? When we think about this, I think that when we look back at Israel in the wilderness, one of the problems is that although Israel was physically walking around in the wilderness, they were physically in the wilderness, their minds, their internal beings was still in Egypt, right? So they didn't have like a holistic relationship with the Almighty. It didn't really encompass all aspects of their situation, right? And when we look at this idea of our whole heart and our whole soul and our whole might, our strength, our inner being, right? Our desires, our will, every aspect of ourselves being towards the Almighty. This is what He's asking. He don't want these people who gonna be halfway in. Right? He wants your whole heart, your whole lave. Inner man, mind, will, heart, understanding. Right? Your inner self, right? Your inner being, right? internally, right? When you think about the heart, it's not necessarily dealing with, that muscle that pumps blood inside of your body, right? It's dealing with your inner being, your inner mind, right? Your will. Yahweh wants you to surrender that over to him, right? He wants your inner will to be about him, right? And seeking for and striving towards those things which are pleasing to him, right? Same thing we think about the soul, the nefesh, that nefesh. When you think about the idea of nefesh, it's kind of generic when you think about our soul or our self or our life. It's still, but when think about your appetites. Your appetites are the things that drive you, right? Your appetites is the things that drive you. We think about our appetites in regards to, like food, right? But when we think about, or when we think about this word appetites, it's about our desires, right? It's about our passions, those things which we are passionate about, those things that we have these strong desires towards, the things in our life that actually drives us and causes us to go in a particular direction. So the Most High is saying, I want to be that thing that's driving you in a particular direction.
Right.
I want to be that thing that you are desiring after and passionate about.
Right.
Right? Your whole soul, right? And in all your might. Let's get on with pens.
I have to write this down. I like sharing stuff like this on Facebook. What you learned today.
Mm-hmm. So we think about your might, right? Your force, right? Your abundance, your strength, right? Again, and so again, we think about looking at this, your might and your soul and your heart. Again, he's dealing with all aspects of yourself, not leaving anything out. And the Most High wants all of that, right? He wants to be inside of all of that. He wants to be at the center of your heart. He wants to be at the center of your soul and the center of your might and your strength. And when you think about it, that's part of what it is to be Eloheinu, part of what it is to be your Elohim, right? When he is at the center of your heart and your soul and your might, right? Because when you have other things in here, you are putting those things at God status, right? And this is something that we have to be careful of putting things, in our heart, in our soul, and our might, and having them be at a higher position than Elohim is, right? Because that's idolatry.
Yes, it is.
Right? When we have these things in our life, and these things are more important to us than the Most High, you done made Eloheinu a lie. You just made this idea of Yahweh being your Elohim a lie, because there's nothing that's supposed to be over and above the Almighty in your heart, in your soul, in your might and strength, right? So
where you begin at? The 6-5?
We started looking at 6-4. And then we went down to 5. So again, it's almost as if we make this proclamation of Yahweh being our Elohim, and then I just saw you touch that like this. We make this proclamation of Yahweh being our Elohim, and then he shows us and tells us how to do it. Right? We make the proclamation, Yahweh Elohim, you're my Elohim. But how can I, how? Put me at the center of your heart. Put me at the center of your soul. Put me at the center of your might. Right? Allowing Yahweh to be the one who actually leads and guides and drives you is how you make Eloheinu a reality, how you make Yahweh your Elohim, right? And not allowing anything to move him out of the way. And this is something, you know, this is the key to everything. Right? If we're able to have the Most High at the center of our heart and soul and might, look what verse 6 says, and these words, the words that he just got finished saying, which I command thee this day, shall be in thy heart. Verse 7, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. Right? So what you supposed to teach diligently to your children? How to put Yahweh at the center of your heart, soul, and might. Some scriptures say, the King James says, teach them diligently. The other version, the scriptures had impress upon your children. This idea of teaching diligently has the idea of like prodding, poking. Here, let's look at this. To sharpen wet, to sharpen. Shanan. To teach. Look at this. To be pierced. To be pierced, right? So when you look at this word here, Shanan, you have this here. Let me put this. Let me go back to the ancient real quick. Take it back to the ancient, because it's an interesting word here, and we can see it in a definition, but we can also look at it from the pictures as well. Let's erase this. So Shanan is a sheen.
Pretty good at that.
A noon. And a final noon. Right? Shanan. So the ancient is the two front teeth. Two front teeth and the sprouted seed. All right, so when we think about Shanan, right, the two front teeth give us the idea of a bite or pressure, right? Force. And the noon, and then they have it 2 times, so it's just gonna kind of intensify the idea, is the idea of continuance. So you have a continual pressure, right? You have this continual force with this word that's translated as to diligently teach. It's this repetitive thing that you're going to see over and over again, and it's a bite. You're going to feel it, right? This pressure that's pressing down on you, right? It's not no easy thing. But this is what we're supposed to do with our children, right? Teaching them the ways of Yahweh. Right? Verse 6 says, talking of them, the commands, talking of the law of Yahweh, talking of the ways that you can put Yahweh at the center of your life when you sit down in the house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. This is all day. When there's time for these other things that are going on in your life. You're supposed to be teaching your children diligently, impressing upon your children diligently, talking to them when you sitting in your house, when you walking by the way, when you laying down, and when you getting up. Every part of the day, right? We always should be able to get back to the Most High in our conversations, right? Because we're commanded to do this with our children. So in terms of our children, every aspect of their lives should include something that's going to point them back to the Most High. And I don't know if we always think about this, and if we always put the amount of weight on this that it should be. But this is definitely an important thing that we need to have in our lives, right? Because this is what it says right here, Deuteronomy 6, verse 7. Right? We're keeping this thing going. We're turning this thing into a generational thing, right? Because again, when we started back up, we hear the proclamation. We hear the proclamation that Yahweh is our Elohim, right? And then we proclaim that He is our Elohim, and then we deal with, excuse me. Then we deal with what it means for Him to be our Elohim in terms of being at the center of our heart, soul, and might. And then once we get that, we pass it down, right, to the children. We keep it going. In verse 8, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and thou shalt bear as frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and upon thy gates. Everywhere we look, should be pointing back to the Almighty in terms of our house. Right? In our house, everything we look around, we should see things that point us to the Almighty. Right? When it talks about binding them for a sign upon thine hand, understanding where your strength even comes from, right? When we think about this, what's this? Let's see what word this is. Yod, hand, right? Your hand, your strength, and your power, right? Understanding that comes from the Almighty, right? The frontlets between thine eyes. That's your thoughts, right? That's your brain, right? Your thoughts and your strength need to be dedicated to the Most High. So we see that here in these words in the Shema and in the Ahavta. Okay, so I didn't want to pass up that first part of Deuteronomy, but I want to go over to Deuteronomy chapter 8, which is this week's reading, and deal with some things inside of there. Okay, so let's see. Let's read down. Let's just see how far we're gonna go from start off with here. Let's read down to verse chapter 8 down. Yeah, we 8 is really where we're supposed to be at this week. Since we was gone, I didn't want to skip chapter 6. And the first part of chapter 6.
So where did we stop at 6? 4 to what?
We were to 9. And let's see. We're gonna read the first 6 verses of chapter 8.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Guard to do every command which I command you today, that you might live, and shall increase and go in, and shall possess the land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahweh, your Elohim, led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. And he humbled you and let you suffer hunger and fed you with manna, which you do not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out from the mouth of Yahweh. Your garments do not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you shall know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Yahweh, your Elohim, discipline you. Therefore you shall guard the commands of Yahweh, your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him.
Okay. So there's some interesting things we can take note of when we look at these 6 verses here. First of all, when we look over back verse 1 where it says guard to do every command, or the entire commandment that I commanded you today, you shall be careful to do. We've talked about the idea of guarding before. Keep that word shamar. See, it says, keep this day you shall you observe. But we notice is to keep or to guard or to observe or to give heed, right? So all of the things that are included in the idea of guarding are in this word here, shamar. When we think about, but he's referring to what? He's referring to the commandments, right? So we are to this day to guard these commandments and do them, right? To keep them, to observe them, to give heed to them, right? So, but not only is he saying that, right? That you may live, right? These are the words of life that he's actually giving you. These are the words that are actually going to sustain and bring blessing to your life, these commandments, right? It's not as if he's just telling you to do these things just for, whatever, just because I said so. But these things that he's giving you are words of life, right? And he's wanting for you to observe and do these things that you may live, right? Because he's giving us a way, the way to be, right? This is how we're able to live and go forth and prosper in life.
I was thinking about, just even as we teach our children things, it's not
You are
like
now muted.
it's not like we teach them things, like that aren't important, or you know what I mean. It's like we're teaching them so they could walk in it.
Right. So you know how to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how to treat people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When we think about the commandments is giving us two things. It's telling us how to deal with the Most High.
Yeah.
It's telling us what he likes. It's telling us what he expects from us. And then it tells us how we are to deal with people in right ruling, how we're able to deal with people in an upright way. Right? This is how we live. If I don't know how to treat my neighbor, he might mess around and kill me. Right? He's giving us the ways that we're able to literally to live. Right? And multiply and go in and possess the land which Yahweh swear unto the fathers. Verse 2, and thou shalt remember all the way which Yahweh the Elohim led thee this 40 years. Now we actually talked about this a little bit at Sukkot. Because when we think about the wilderness, we get a he lays it out for us what the whole point of the wilderness even is.
Ask his.
Do you know what the
What's the wilderness for?
Hurry up.
The wilderness was
Spit it out.
You said, what did you say you was going to tell the people at the kill-op? You said you went to the wilderness for what?
I went to the wilderness to get judged.
Right. So we see, like in verse 2, it says, and thou shalt remember all the way which Yahweh thy Elohim led thee these 40 years in the wilderness to humble thee, to prove thee, and to know what was in thy heart.
Yep.
Right? We just talked about what was supposed to be in their heart anyway, right? Just at the center of your heart is supposed to be Yahweh, right? That's how we know that he is Eloheinu, right? When he's at the center, right? But how do we know that he's at the center? We got to go through some stuff.
Because it's like, what's the scripture verse? If in the day of adversity you fall, your faith is weak.
I don't know what verse that is, but when you think about the truth of what that is, that's the proof. The proof is in the proverbial pudding, right? I can say whatever I want to say, but when I get in the mix, that's going to let it be known where I'm at. So when we look at what the Most High did,
Proverbs 24:10.
Proverbs
24:10.
What do it say exactly?
Well, I guess the New Living Translation says, if you fell under pressure, your strength is small. It's too small.
Yeah. Why'd you read that version?
Because that's the first one that came up here.
Uh,
King James says, "If you faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is small."
yeah. Right. So when we think about our strength, if our strength is Yahweh, ain't nothing small about that, right?
Right.
So if we're walking in the strength of the Almighty, then we shouldn't fail in adversity, right? Failing in adversity shows us that our strength is small. Failing in adversity shows us that we're not leaning on the big strength, the big leader who is Elohim, who is Yahweh. But again, when we look at the time in the wilderness, the 40 years in the wilderness, the purpose of it was to humble. 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 Anah, to be occupied, to be busy, to afflict, to oppress, to be afflicted, to be bowed down, to be put down, to become low, to be depressed, to be downcast, to be afflicted, to stoop, to humble oneself, to bow down, to be afflicted, so on and so forth. So when we think about the purpose of the wilderness was to bring us down low, right? To put us in our proper perspective as it relates to the Almighty, right? The wilderness, the 40 years in the wilderness was so that Israel could be put in its proper place as it relates to the Almighty. To show you where you are in relation to the Almighty, right? He led Israel through the wilderness those 40 years to show who he was and how he relates to the people. But not only that, but also to prove thee, it says, which is Nasa. Nasa, to test, to try, to prove, tempt, right? To actually prove. Like if I buy something, right? Now I'm going to use it, right? I saw the commercial, but now I'm going to see if it really stands up to the test, right? So that's what was going on in the wilderness towards the people from the Almighty. Because the Almighty wants to know what's in your heart. What's in your heart, right? I could hear what you're saying, but what's in your heart? I heard you say that I'm your Elohim, but what's in your heart? Right? So it takes experience. It takes life actually happening to actually know what's in your heart, right? And that's what we saw with the wilderness. And you know what we talked about at Sukkot dealt with the fact that when we think about the time in the wilderness, it's really an example of our life, right? Our life is, you know, kind of pictured by Israel's time in the wilderness on their way into the promised land, right? So we can look at our everyday life as being the wilderness. And in our everyday life, we're being humbled and we're being tested and going through trials for what? To know what's in our hearts. To know if our confession is true. Right. Whether thou wouldest keep the commandments or no. You said you was going to do it, but let's see what your life said. You said you was going to do it, but let's see what happened whenever you get over into this situation right here. You said you was going to do it, but what happened when this happens over here? I want to see. And that's what we had with the wilderness. That was the whole point of the wilderness. A lot of people died in the wilderness. Right?
A lot of people didn't make it.
A lot of people didn't make it. Yahweh saw what was in a lot of them people's hearts, and he didn't like it. Right? A lot of people proved who they was. They were saying one thing, but they obviously wasn't that. Right?
I think that we get, we definitely get that taste, that Sukkot, of
well, we get to taste every day of our lives.
Yeah.
But it's intensified,
as Sukkot because you're around all these people with different personalities and different ways, and you're like kind of immersed with them, like, and you're not in nobody's in a comfortable situation.
Right.
Everybody's outside of the comfort zones.
Right. But it's like this intensified thing. It's our life intensified. Our life, remember, everything about our life is supposed to be about the Almighty. We're walking around the house. We're walking around the way. We waking up. When we laying down. If we telling it to our children, we got to be doing it in order to tell it to the children. Right, so it's part of our life.
Like, oh, we're gonna do this, but don't look at what we do. Just look at what we say.
Right, it's not that.
It's a continual instruction.
So when we think about times like Sukkot, where it's this time where it's Sukkot, it's about Yahweh, it's his feast time. We're doing this thing unto Yahweh. But then somebody sit over here and they got all this to say. And then, I'm used to doing it like this, and I'm with these people who like to do it like that, right? You got these things that are happening in the context of Yahweh's times, which is proving you and humbling you, right? Am I going to maintain who I am in Yahweh, regardless of what is going on around me? Or am I going to let what's going on around me dictate who I am?
And that's exactly what you was talking about with love, Tony, just a minute ago.
Because it's the same thing.
My reaction.
Because it's the same situation. Yahweh's trying to see what's in your heart.
It don't have nothing to do with your circumstances.
It don't got anything it ain't got nothing to do with your circumstances. It's about what's in your heart. So he's going to test what's in your heart by hitting you with these external stimuli and see what happens. And that's what happened. He took the people. I led you in the wilderness. I took you to a place that didn't have no water on purpose to see what you was going to do. I took you to these places, dude, and these places didn't have nothing like what you was used to. On purpose to see what you was going to do. Oh, he said it right there. And he humbled thee and suffered thee the hunger. I took you right to the place that didn't have no food on purpose. That's what he said right there. I made you hungry. I made you be hungry because I knew there wasn't nothing around for you to eat. And then I fed you manna.
Which is an insult, right? Them calling it manna. What is this?
But it's fitting though. but it's fitting,
You
right?
didn't know it.
When we
You
think
didn't know
about
it. That's why he
it,
said,
says it
"What is
right
it?"
there. I fed you with manna, which thou knewest not.
You didn't know about that.
Meanwhile, manna actually means what is it? I fed you what is it, which thou knewest not. You didn't know it what it was because that's why you said, what is it? That's why you called it manna. What is it?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about how, wow, the Shema really connects with this, because you were saying how the whole thought process behind, who is it? Hearing is doing, seeing is actually experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And how whenever the Most High provided food from heaven, we experienced that by eating it.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know what it was, right?
What is it?
But we experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
We experienced it. So you experiencing something that comes from the Most High, something that you don't understand, but you are able to experience, which is the same thing as Him. Experiencing Yeshua, experiencing Him is something that's outside of us, coming down from the heavenlies and experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just connecting it back to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. So when we look at verse 3, where it says, and he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh doth man live. So let's think about this now, right? Let's think about what's going on. He, the Most High with manna was giving a spiritual principle. He was showing Israel something on a spiritual level with this manna, with this bread from heaven that you knew not of, and your fathers did not know anything about it either. Right? With this bread and he's teaching them what? That you should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh doth thou live. That the motivating factor of your life must be that which proceeds from the mouth of the Almighty. The thing that is giving you, that's showing you and taking you along the pathway of life is not your physical food that you eat, but the words, or that which, because the words are italicized, that which proceeds out of the mouth of the Almighty. You live by that. That's the thing, again, that's at the center of your situation. That which proceeds out of the mouth of the Almighty. Let's look over at because we can't talk about this without flipping over to the book of John. We'll come back, but we gotta flip over to John chapter 6. Read some of this here. Yeah. Now let's read a couple verses out of here. You start reading now from 31 there.
Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it has been written. He gave them bread out of the heavens to eat. Therefore, Yeshua said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, Moshe did not give you the bread out of the heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who came down out of the heaven and gave life to the world. So they said to him, Master, give us this bread always. And Yeshua said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not get hungry at all, and he who believes in me shall not get thirsty at all. But I said to you that you have seen me and still do not believe. All that the Father gives me, what happened?
I'm a fall.
Yeah. Bread which came down.
What verse was you on? Oh, there you go, 36.
But I said to you that you have seen me and still do not believe. All the Father gives me shall come to me, and the ones who comes to me I shall by no means cast out, because I have come down out of heaven, not to do my own desire, but the desire of him who sent me. This is the desire of the Father who sent me, that all he has given me, and I should not lose of it, but should raise it in the last day. And this is the desire of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him should possess everlasting life, and I shall raise him up in the last day. Therefore, the Yidim were grumbling against him, because he said, I am the bread which came down out of heaven. And they said, is it not Yahweh, Yeshua, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I've come down out of heaven? Then Yeshua answered and said to them, do not grumble with one another. No one is able to come to me unless the Father who sends me draws him, and I shall raise him up in the last day. It has been written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by Yahweh. Everyone then who has heard from the Father and declared comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father, except he who is from Elohim has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me possesses everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that anyone might eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he shall live forever. And indeed, the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world.
Okay, stop right there. So when we think about looking backwards at what Yahweh was saying to the people back in Deuteronomy, in terms of him giving this manna so that they would know that they can't just live by their physical sustenance. Don't just look at things from a physical perspective. Don't look to get all the answers, and don't look to find all of the things that are able to sustain you from a physical perspective. In fact, your life, which is exemplified by your life in the wilderness, they went through the whole wilderness and they ate manna. So in other words, they weren't supposed to look towards physical sustenance in order to live and survive. Right? The times of days that they sought to receive these physical things to sustain them, they ended up being a curse to them. Right? They was eating. They had to eat so much quail was coming out their ears. Right. So
we were talking about the food from the earth is supposed to be food from the heavens.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right now.
I mean, like like the garlic and all these things was like these vegetables.
Oh, the things that they desire. Yeah, all of that's a good point, because when you think about all of the things that the people was desiring when they said, we need some food. We need to go back to Egypt when we got these leeks and these garlics and these melons and all of these things. They named all these root vegetables, right? They named all these things that actually grow underneath of the earth. They named all these things that attach them back to the earth when that's what they was being freed from to begin with. So we see the Most High giving them this manna, changing the people's mind, saying, don't look towards the earth. Don't look under the earth. Look to the hills from which cometh your help, right? Look to the heavens, and I'll send this bread from heaven, and that will sustain you.
Where did I start off at 50?
No, we was 631 is where we started reading 631.
631?
Yep, down to 51. Because Yeshua was talking about the bread of life and him actually being the bread of life. Right? So Yeshua took it all the way back to the manna, showing us that when we look at this manna, this what is it? This thing that we can't understand, this thing that we look at and we can't understand it, it don't make any earthly sense to us when we try to figure out what this thing is. But when we eat it, it makes us live. We live from this thing. It sustains us. It sustains us if we take it in. It sustains us if we believe it and we ingest it. We take it in, right? They never knew what the stuff was. And it was miraculous. This stuff was miraculous. It would be, and you could pick as much as you wanted to pick during the week for a day. But as soon as that day was gone, that stuff would die. That stuff would just disappear. Except for one day a week on Shabbat, you was able to get double portion, and it lasted. It knew, but I bet on that third day, it just disappeared. It just spoiled again. This stuff is miraculous. What is it? What is this stuff?
When they put on the side of the ark lasted.
Yeah, that lasts forever. They got a bowl of it in the thing. That stuff lasts until they didn't have the ark no more, right? This stuff was miraculous, this bread from heaven. But they still didn't know what it was. Yeshua said, I'm the bread of heaven. I'm the bread from heaven. I'm the one who come down from heaven. I'm the one who come down from heaven, just like that manna came down. And just like you don't know what that is, and it's just like you can't sit up here and really describe the essence of what manna is. You can't do that about Yeshua either.
All you can do is say he's one. God.
That's all you can say. And if I eat him, I'm going to live forever. I'm going to have life everlasting if I eat him. What is it? Right? Yahweh was saying something back there in Deuteronomy chapter 8. Right? He caused the people to eat manna so that they could understand the idea of receiving bread from heaven and not leaning on your understanding of what is able to physically sustain you. He was teaching the people to make Yahweh their Eloheinu. He was teaching the people to put Yahweh on top of every aspect of their lives. And the people that wasn't able to do that, those was the ones who died in the wilderness. Right? All right, let's go back over Deuteronomy. Let's go back over there. Back to Deuteronomy 8. We are at about verse 4.
I can't believe this.
Hmm?
Oh my God.
Oh, you got it.
It got stiff up there. You see that?
Yeah.
It locks up on me.
Okay, so if we go back. Okay, so he talks about the bread of life. He talks about this manna, this bread from heaven. And then he talks about the fact that he sustained the people. Your garments didn't wear out. You ain't get no bunions on your feet for 40 years. Your shoes didn't wear out. I sustained you. Yahweh showed, he talked to the people, I sustained you all that time. I got you through. You ain't died. Verse 5, thus you shall know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Yahweh your Elohim disciplines you. That stuff that happened to you out there happened for a purpose, because I love you. If it didn't happen, that would show you that I hated you. Right? Yahweh expressed his love towards Israel by shaping Israel into the people that he needed for them to be. By removing all of the things from Israel that wasn't that didn't line up with what the Almighty had for them, for them to be, right? And he compared it to the disciplining of a son.
So in the wilderness, was it like he was training them like that Shannon when they was all throughout the wilderness?
Shannon. Yeah, that's what the wilderness was. Driving that foolishness out of Israel. Right? What's that proverb that talk about driving the foolishness out? You look that up for me?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what was going on in the wilderness. Right? That discipline, that chastening. So that
Proverbs 22:15.
yeah, what I say? Hold on, let me just pull it up. That's my verse right there. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline drives it far from him. Mm-hmm. That folly be bound up in your heart. But you need to get that stuff up out of there, right? And it's driven up out of there by chastisement. Not because you don't love them, but actually because you love them. Right?
Yeah, right.
So that's what happened with Israel. And again, the wilderness is just a picture of our lives, our whole life. Right? So again, we think about this idea of testing and proving. This is just this right here. This is just disciplining, right? Seeing if what you say line up with your actions. Look at Yeshua. Even Yeshua, when he came in the flesh, had to go through proving. Proving.
Yeah.
mean, we've seen that. We've seen that. You always said what it was in Deuteronomy in regards to Israel. The same thing is true for read that.
Then Yeshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tried by the devil. And after having fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry.
Yeah.
And the tear came and said to him,
the trier
came and said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, command that these stones be bread.
Okay, so we don't got to go down the list of what happened. But if we just look at these 3 verses here, first of all, Yeshua was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tried,
So
to be proved, to be
He
tested.
really was good when he told him that. I was in the wilderness to be judged.
Yeah,
I went to the wilderness to be judged.
Right. So this was true for Israel. It was even true for Yeshua in the flesh as a man. He was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tried. And after having fasted 40 days and 40 nights, again, look how Yeshua did it, right? He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. He was hungry, right? He disconnected himself from that physical sustenance, right? And by doing so, he connected himself to that spiritual sustenance, right? He was physically hungry. But when if we read through the story, we see that he was spiritually strong, right? Because the trier came and said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, command that these stones become bread. And Yeshua like, well, that's not gonna make me be who I am, right? I don't gotta sit up here and do this thing that you talking about to say whether I'm the son of Elohim. But he answered, it is written, man shall not live by. He didn't even deal with what he said, did he? He didn't deal with that because it didn't make any sense.
It didn't affect what was inside of him.
His response didn't have anything to do with what the trier said. But it seems as if, based on that, it's showing you the strength, first of all, the strength that he was able to find whenever he was able to actually receive from on high. That's what he dealt with. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. I'm not going to sit up here and deal with your questionings of who I am. If I'm the son of Elohim, whatever. I'm stronger than that. Right? So again, just the idea of understanding that trials, proving, is part of this. Chastisement is part of this, right? Approving of the confession that we have made in this life that we live.
Can I say something in addition to all that? Is that there's a lot of people who come on the scene, and they come on strong, and they even start leading people, and you know what I mean, and teaching people, and then they don't last. They don't last themselves, and it's just like sometimes it's not even how you begin necessarily, but it's like how I guess connected you are to the Most High, because some people begin real strong, but they don't make it through till the end.
Right.
And
that's the proving.
They can have all their arguments lined up on why they believe in the Bible and why they believe in the Torah and all this stuff. And then sometimes they study themselves out of the kingdom.
Yeah.
You know, they get so studied and learned that now they can't even just accept simple things like the Bible is real.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Because they've studied themselves to a point where they're no longer even able to believe in the word. And so it's like when we're in this wilderness, in this life, we got to look at things from a spiritual level, a spiritual context, and you know,
Right, because
sometimes
this
people,
life is
yeah,
this life is spiritual.
everything is spiritual.
And that's what the Most High is trying to get these people to understand, is that he needs to be at the center. The thing that drives you needs to be the Almighty.
Not intellectual.
Not none of these physical things. These physical things are real. They really do exist. But the thing that drives you and the thing that sustains you must be Eloheinu.
Mm.
Yahweh Eloheinu.
Ooh.
Because you can have many Eloheinu.
Mm-hmm.
But Yahweh Eloheinu is what should be driving you, what is sustaining you, and what's getting you through the wilderness. Right? So we look down at verse 6. Therefore, you shall guard the commandments of Yahweh Eloheinu, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahweh, your Elohim, is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams of water and fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, and a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you eat bread without scarcity, in which you do not lack at all, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you dig copper. And you shall eat and be satisfied, and shall bless Yahweh your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Verse 11, be on guard lest you forget Yahweh your Elohim by not guarding his commands and his right rulings and his laws which I command you today. Lest you eat and shall be satisfied, and build lovely houses and shall dwell in them, and your herds and your flocks increase, and your silver and your gold are increased, and all that you have is increased, that your heart has become lifted up, and you forget Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage, who led you through the great and awesome wilderness, fiery serpents and thirst where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock. He going through all of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just talked about these people who start off fast and strong. They receive all these blessings. They living high off the hog. I mean, high off the cow. Right?
Yeah. They might be living how.
But then they forget how they got there. Right? They forget that Yahweh is the one who brought them there in the first place. Right? Lest you forget, and your heart becomes lifted up. Remember, he put you in the wilderness so that you could be humbled and brought down low to begin with.
Right.
That's why you was even in the wilderness to begin with, to bring you down low. He had to break you all the way down. But then once he broke you all the way down, then he allowed you to just be built up by his blessings.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a nice land.
But he don't want you to forget, because that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do when you start getting all these blessings. You forget how you got there in the first place.
Didn't say bread without scarcity.
Yeah, you just had bread all over the place. Silver and gold increase. Flocks and herds increase. Everything increase. But then you forgot how you got there. You forgot what was at the center of your heart and your soul and your forcefulness. You forgot that the Most High is your Eloheinu, right? And that's what happens. That's what happens to them people. Because when you, at the end of the day, this is just a continuation of the proving. The proving can be something that's negative against you or positive against you. We'll see. It's easy to turn to the Most High when you at the bottom. But is you gonna stay with the Most High when you get on top? It's still proving, it's still testing, right? Because if you're able to not forget, that's showing where your heart is. But if you do forget,
Right.
that your heart then becomes lifted up and you do forget, it's just showing where your heart is. So it's still proving, right? It's still that testing that's going on. Whether it's bad times, adversity, or blessings. Verse 15, who led you through the great and awesome wilderness, fiery serpents and scorpions and thirst where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who led you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, in order to humble you and to try you, to do you good in the end. I want to drop down to 19. And it shall be, if you by any means forget Yahweh your Elohim and follow other mighty ones and serve them and bow yourself to them, I have warned you this day that you shall certainly perish. Right? All this time he's dealing with this idea of Eloheinu. Are you going to allow Yahweh to be your mighty one? Are you going to allow Yahweh to be the one that leads and guides you? Are you going to trust in his leading? Are you going to trust in how he chooses to sustain you? Or are you going to lean to your own understanding? Or are you going to allow your physical circumstances and situations to sway you from walking in rightness? This is the test. This is the test that we all got to go through of allowing Yahweh to be your Elohim. Yahweh Eloheinu. Is he gonna be at the center? Is he gonna be your mighty one, or are you gonna put these other things in front and serve them? Or are you gonna put these other things on top and bow down to them? Most High is not playing no games. He said, I'm warning you this day.
Wait. Where's it say?
You'll certainly perish.
He said, I'm warning you.
Verse 19. I have warned you this day that you will certainly perish. Like the nation which Yahweh is destroying before you. How you going out and you taking out these nations in my name? How you going out based on my strength that I'm giving you? How you going out and taking them nations out? That's how you gonna be taken out once you go up here and bow down to these other gods. like the nations which Yahweh is destroying before you, so you are to perish because you did not obey the voice of Yahweh.
Didn't Shema. You didn't hear.
You go all the way back. All the way back. I'm
Mhm.
telling you now. I'm putting this out
Take
here.
warning.
That's just
Hear Israel.
Uh-huh.
Yahweh
Our
Eloheinu.
Mm.
Okay.
Take warning.
All right. So that being said, anybody have any thoughts or questions? Comments?
Man, that just shows me that I got to walk in the righteous ways so I don't have to hear that fatal sound. Depart from me, I never knew you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our whole life is a test.
Yeah.
How you gonna react to this thing? How you gonna react to this thing?
Yeah.
How's this situation going to affect you? Is it going to affect you?
Right.
Is it gonna change you?
Right. Are you going to bow down to these circumstances, or are you going to stand in the Almighty? Are you going to let these things be the things that lead and guide you through life, or are you going to let the Ruach HaKodesh be the thing that lead and guide you in this life? I mean, it's letting you know when you put those other things on top, you just made them your mighty one. You said them things are stronger than me. Them things are stronger than me. And then, but he said, what happens when you do that, right? You're gonna certainly perish. So it's about our lifestyle. It's about our life. It's about our everyday existence of allowing Yahweh to actually be our Elohim, to be the one that's on top always.
Where's the verse to take warning verse?
8:19.
8:19.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that being said, we're gonna shut it down for now. We're gonna come back on next week, Yahweh, and deal with some more of this Torah.
Torah love.